we've all been deceived and manipulated in somehow. And I
Right.
think there's been so many chemical exposures that people don't even realize how that has impacted them and even manipulated their own
Yep.
physiology. Um, so you really, like, I think detoxing is important. And I think that word scares a lot of people, but
Hmm.
um, our body detoxes every day. That's what it wants to do, particularly
Yep.
if there's more exposure in the environment. You don't want that accumulation because it's trying to clear what doesn't belong.
Hello and welcome to another episode of The Wealth Within Us. I am Michelle Blades, and today I'm very honored to have with me Dr. Cindy Azevedo, and she is a naturopathic doctor and has had quite a journey getting here. So welcome so much, Dr. Cindy. I'm so glad that you decided to come on my show and grateful that you responded to my message. We've talked, and I love your journey on how you got here. So I would love you to just introduce yourself and, talk a little bit about how you got to here being Dr. Cindy Azevedo, naturopath.
Thank you, Michelle. It's really an honor to be on your show and to connect with you. So,
Thank
this journey has been a long one. It's not a typical journey that most people take, particularly in the realm of anything medical. So, it is a road less traveled, so to say. But everything in my life experience has kind of led me in this direction.
you.
So it started with the way that I was brought up, my upbringing, that obviously influenced me and my interests and into this direction. Um, just being exposed to basically whole food. We grew up with my parents having a garden, so we had fresh food from the garden. My mom always made homemade food, so lots of soups, breads, and whatnot. So
Yeah. So not a lot
yeah,
of processed foods going on there.
yeah, and then the exposure to my ethnic culture and all of that. So, being first generation born here in the US, my parents came from Portugal, specifically from the Azores.
Oh.
So, they brought what they knew then, from there, and I was
Mhm.
exposed to that. So, as a child, I um, it, got to see animals, farms, and pastures, and what real clean food is like, and what a less stressed life actually is, versus the modern industrial way of living, which is kind of what I've been thrusted into with the move.
Busy, fast, I would say. Busy and fast and quick and instant gratification. Yeah, all that stuff, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. And so my own health journey is actually what brought me into naturopathic medicine. I was always interested in nature, health, the arts, and things like that. I liked nutrition. I wanted to learn more. So I had the inquisition and the curiosity. I was sick as a child, had a lot of health issues, and just trying to figure out my own health issues. So I've gone through the conventional mainstream path, and I wasn't getting the help that I was looking for or the answers that were kind of making me better. So I knew that there had to be another way and other options. So eventually, that's kind of what took me down this direction. I didn't grow up knowing what a naturopathic doctor was. I wasn't exposed to naturopathic doctors or naturopathic medicine in a sense, as far as the professional title. So I just stumbled upon this basically from being diagnosed with PCOS
Mm.
when I was young, and it was discovered because I all of a sudden I didn't get my period. I wasn't sure why, and they did an ultrasound, and then there was a ring of pearls that was found. So based off of that, they labeled me with that
Yeah.
diagnosis.
And you and
Uh,
I have a similar story with this, as I've mentioned on here. That's why I think you and I connect so well.
yeah, I know it's actually pretty common. And then I was
Yes.
young. when I had looked it up, I was so depressed and devastated. I was like, oh
Oh,
my God, because everything that I read about it wasn't good. And it was,
yeah. And it was basically like, there's no cure for this. You're going to struggle with infertility. Your hormones are always off balance. Da, 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 da.
exactly. Yes. And so I eventually, what I ended up doing is I ran into a health food store, and this was a local health food store. To me, they're not open anymore. But the nice thing is, I stopped in. I shared what I was just diagnosed with and what was happening, and he recommended one herb. So he gave me a product to try. I tried it, and I actually felt better being on it. And that was that was actually what sparked the basically the Inquisition and just
And
wanting to
how old
know.
were you when you did that? Because you were
Oh,
diagnosed younger. So then when you were like, I'm going to take this into my own hands, like maybe how old were you when you went to that natural?
so I was in my early 20s.
Okay. Yeah. So very young, you were like, I'm gonna figure this out.
Yeah, yeah. I was definitely in my early 20s. I had some symptoms, definitely acne, hair loss. Like I just think a lot
Hmm.
of GI stuff.
Yeah.
Um, I had toxic exposures that I wasn't aware of then, but I had learned later, and just the
Hmm.
impact of what those exposures had done to the endocrine system. Just lots of
Yeah.
stress around me. So trying to balance it all out and having a hard time with it, right?
Hmm.
But it was Vitex. So I had tried Vitex, and that is actually what made me feel better. Um,
Yeah. Is that the same thing as the chaseberry? Is
it
that what?
is.
Okay, that's what I thought.
Yep. Yeah. And that interest in me, my own personal experience, that actually what sparked me was like, oh, let me learn. I got to learn more about this. And then that's how I found out about naturopathic medicine. I looked up schools, and then that's how I started that journey.
But that's not where you initially went, correct?
No, you're right. Yeah. So I know I'm trying to keep the story short. There's always so much to say. Uh,
I know. But I think it's good for people to know that like naturopath wasn't always on your radar. And I think too, sometimes maybe it's family expectations or your own expectation or societal expectations that are like, no, do this conventional path. This is for, the woo-woo people and the other stuff that they've kind of, the witchery that has been stigmatized. And I'm sure with intention, which we all know that it's not true.
yeah. So when I first went to college, like I graduated high school, trying to figure out what I'm going to do. What am I going to go to school for? So school was being pushed on me. Like, you have to go and get an education. Like, okay, like, what am I interested in? So I went right into biology. That was my first major. So the typical sciences. My plan was to go to med school. And
Well, you're definitely healing and helping people. So you
yep,
still
yeah.
do that.
Yeah. So I started college, and I'm taking these biology classes and these science classes, and I was like, you know what? I really don't want to be in a lab. Like, I don't know about this. Um, Even though I had taken some sciences in high school, but when I got to college, it was a different experience,
Hmm.
and the lab work, and I was questioning things, and I think intuitively I knew. I was like, yeah, I'm not sure if this is the right path for me.
Oh,
And so I wanted to take nutrition, because I said, you know what, that's what I'm really interested in, is in nutrition. I don't want to be stuck in a lab messing with these
yeah.
chemicals. um, and when I found out that nutrition wasn't available where I was, I transferred, I changed my major, I sought out nutrition classes, and then I even went the allied health route for courses and majors. And even I was like, yeah, I'm still not helping people the way that I want to help people, or at least now that I would call it root cause medicine, like getting to the root.
Oh, I
Uh,
love the way you said that. Root cause medicine. Yeah, I love that.
yeah, I didn't have the term or the terminology or the knowledge when I was, early on in my education in undergrad, but I knew that there had to be something like a better option, like an actual way where it can
Yeah,
really help people, not just putting a Band-Aid on things.
right.
And That's actually, so it's like the end of college is actually when I found out about naturopathic medicine. That I looked into the schools, and there are schools, so there is actually a professional path for this.
Mm-hmm.
And that's actually what happened. So I completely changed my direction. Had I stuck with the major that I would have, as far as it was allied health, and I would have had to go to grad school if I wanted to practice in that particular profession. And so again, I changed my major. And I said, I'm just going to go for naturopathic medicine, not knowing anything about it, the future perspectives of it, what was required.
Like,
I
this is what my calling is. I feel very called and driven to, this is my path.
Yeah, you know what? And I was still working on helping myself. So I think what it was is I got to figure out what's going on with me so that I can help other people.
Right.
And what actually is part of my journey is now that I reflect back, is me becoming the person that I was looking for during my health struggles. That
Yeah.
I wasn't finding. So that's actually what I am. I feel that I am now is helping other women through their journey, but by being who I was looking for back then.
And your main focus right now is hormonal endocrine system balance, pretty much for women, right? I mean, I think men have the same. I mean, I think men's hormones are all over the place too.
They definitely are. Men have taken a huge hit as well.
Yeah.
There's we need some great men to focus on men's health for sure. And there are some naturopathic doctors doing that. So I don't want to claim,
Yeah.
I don't want to claim the title that I'm an expert in men's health, but I'm not feminist at all. So I have absolutely helped men in my practice. And believe it or not, some of the women that I've helped, they love the men in their life, just like same with me. I respect and love the men that are in my life. And so some of these ladies, I was like, I've helped them, and they're like, can you help my husband? Or can you help my boy? Or can you help so-and-so? I was like, yeah, what's going on? And so they kind of share a little bit of some of the concerns. I was like, yeah, we can absolutely work on this. So I'm not completely exclusive to say that I will never help a man in my life. And even with fertility, because I like working
Yeah,
with.
fertility is on both sides. I think as a society, we tend to stigmatize women for it, but men, you got some skin in that game too.
Yeah. Both need to address lifestyle factors for sure, and we're both men and women. We're both getting hit with so much
Oh my
with
gosh,
society.
right? And maybe
Yes.
we should kind of switch to that because, like, how did we get here? And like you, I was diagnosed with PCOS at a young age, and it is an endocrine hormonal whole imbalance. Something's messing with it. I have a couple of reasons why I might have. I mean, I grew up in a house of smokers. There was a super fund behind my house, so there's that.
Toxic
But
exposure too.
yeah, so a lot of exposure. But I think even people that maybe haven't had those situations, I don't think there's anyone who's not exposed. I mean, we're all eating, and even if we're eating organic, I know our organic foods are still being exposed to the same GMOs. So maybe let's talk about, like, how did we get here in the first place? Because this didn't happen overnight. This has been years. Like, this is not some overnight problem. I mean, I was born in the early 70s. Clearly a lot of that stuff was going on back then, and even before then as well. I mean, probably you would say almost since the Industrial Revolution, or even beforehand. I don't know.
Well, you know what? The fertility rates have definitely been declining since the early
Right.
1900s, since they've been tracking. So I
Okay.
think, I don't know the exact year, but I know it's the early 1900s. I think 1909, or like right around that
Okay.
time frame.
Which is interesting. I'll just add that it was after the Spanish flu and the vaccines that were introduced then. So you can do your own rabbit hole down that. But there was some stuff that was going on in there, correct?
Mm-hmm. Yes, that is interesting.
Yeah. So it is interesting because that was around, like, what, 1901? And then within a few short years, coincidence? Not sure. but that's a topic for another day, but just planting a seed for people to go down that little rabbit hole if they so choose.
It is something to explore for sure on your own time, because there's a lot to dig in there.
Right.
But we've been exposed with so much. Even I'm just thinking of like the way that my parents grew up, where they grew up, and the way that they grew up and the time that they grew up. They were growing up and this is the term organic, truly organic.
Yeah.
They weren't getting exposed to pesticides. They were not getting exposed to GMOs. If there were vaccines then, it was minimal. Mm-hmm. So they didn't have the vaccine schedule that these kids have now, but where I think the vaccine schedule is like 70 vaccines before the age insane. Of 2 or 3. It's a ridiculous burden.
And it's a lot of load on a small developing body.
It is.
Because what is it? We're still developing, I think, up until am I correct? Is it 25?
I think, yeah, you're right. I think the brain completes development around like age 25, 26, right. Or right around so late 20s, give or take.
Yeah. It's a lot longer than I think most people realize.
Mm-hmm. So, and we're injecting children plus feeding them with poison. So and who knows what we're spraying. There's so much that we're getting hit with. So and my parents, they're like, they grew up in a baby boomer age. So, right. And plus they didn't have as much as now of what I have, as far as material things, mm-hmm. But I think they grew up in a great time as far as having clean water, clean food.
Yeah. 'Cause when were plastics introduced? Wasn't it like the 30s or 40s or something like that, when there was this big plastics boom, which plastics contain a lot of toxin, especially endocrine disruptors.
Absolutely. Mm-hmm. So my exposure to my parents' exposure is completely different. And then having a little bit of a family history on both sides of diabetes. So mm-hmm. I think I had some predispositions. My detox pathways are a little sluggish, okay. And things like that. So my accumulation of toxins, or the clearance, is not necessarily the best. So that's something that I've always had to work on.
Yeah. And ours started at a much younger age than our parents did. They had kind of a lot less in the beginning, I would say, formative years of their lives.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So so the whole vaccine schedule, mm-hmm. And then on top of that, adding in the plastics and the plasticizers and all of that.
The GMOs in our foods now, with farming, with big agriculture.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
absolutely.
I mean, there's so much that, even I would say down to the water, the sort of, our waterways are really polluted. I think I read some staggering statistic that like 3% of water in North America is maybe untouched and pure. It's not
There's
very
so much runoff. Mm-hmm. Yeah. From the pesticides and whatever's being done. There's a runoff.
Whatever's being sprayed in our skies. And the cell towers, oh my gosh, right? And I know that's more and more recent, but yeah, it's kind of been in our lifetime, I would say, and maybe back to the baby boomers, like much, I would say for them, maybe it was, cigarette smoking. Remember when doctors would be like, oh yeah, I prefer whatever cigarette brand I do, knowing that they were, well, I don't know if the doctors knew, maybe they did, I don't know, but the tobacco companies certainly knew that they were carcinogenic. But mm-hmm. Yeah, yes. But I think we, starting in the 70s, 80s, 90s, really started getting this onslaught, and kids born, I'd say even in the early 2000s, they've really almost had, what did they say? What have I read? That even children that are being born with plastics already in their systems. So, yeah, it's kind of crazy how much exponentially our exposure to all these toxins, like you said, different forms. It's not just the GMOs, it's the EMS. It's, oh my gosh, it's probably stuff you don't even know about.
Yeah, I know the invisible stuff that we don't think
Mhm.
about, and that is, it's like what's being sprayed in the sky. We don't know heavy metals. I'm not
Yeah.
sure
The fluoride.
pesticides. I'm
Oh my
not
gosh. The
sure.
pushing of fluoride at
Yeah,
such a young age. Oh
and
my gosh.
yeah, in our mouth. I mean, my if the way my parents grew up. Listen, if if your tooth wasn't good or if it was time to go, it got yanked. There was no
Yeah.
mercury amalgams back in their day. None of that.
And there was no
Um,
connection between the teeth and the organs in the body and the nerve. And like, yeah, there's so much with just the teeth alone.
hmm Absolutely. So it's a lot has changed, even within like let alone one
Right.
generation, but within two generations. So from the introduction of Rockefeller medicine and what that has done to,
Which was right around the 1900s as well. There's your key
yeah,
people in it.
and the
And there was
Federal
a,
Reserve came shortly
yes,
after that.
yeah.
So
1902 was a great reset year if anybody looks into that stuff. So 1902 is definitely on the Great Reset thing. So a lot of things changed. A lot of history was rewritten. So there was a lot of change, a lot of different theories and stuff being very, very much heavily pushed through,
yes, and the
especially with the
bombardment.
medical and the schools and the education system.
Yeah, and even science.
Yeah.
I question a lot in science too.
Hmm.
Um, and
Right.
I just thank God. I think I might have shared this with you before. I really do thank God that He's directed me in this direction. And I didn't go the allopathic route, even though I had some allopathic education in my naturopathic
Hmm.
medical
Well,
schooling.
I would
And
assume there's a lot of crossover, you know.
there is, yeah.
Yeah.
But
It's not like two completely different systems.
mhm. Yes, I mean, biology is biology.
Right.
Um,
Good
but
point.
yeah, yes, nature is nature, right?
Mhm. And it's
So
almost like a matter of, are we going to work with nature or are we going to work with patented pharmaceuticals? And I think that's a lot of what it's really simply is boiling down to.
mhm. It is, and a lot of things I just question as far as the funding, like where is
Yes.
funding these sciences? Um, and obviously, there's a bias that comes into play
Mhm.
with that. So
Even within the organizations and the three-letter agencies that are supposed to be protecting us.
yes, and so are they representing and protecting us? I highly doubt it. To me, it's the
Yeah.
lobbyists that are pushing way, and
Right.
otherwise, I don't think we would have all of these GMOs in our food supply, which
Yeah.
I think went massive in the 1990s. It was, yeah,
Yeah.
1990s, and that's when there was a big push of GMOs
Mhm.
into the food supply, not knowing what the real risk is.
Right. And selling it as, oh, this is good, this is convenient, this is fast. But I know I was in my teens in the 90s, a young teenager, and I certainly wasn't looking at the ingredients, and neither were my parents, because I think one of the biggest changes outside of all this other stuff that we're talking about and toxins and pollutants in the air is that um we're starting to question things. Things are happening so much. I don't think we were questioning things. I think at that time there was sort of a naivety, and I'll include myself in that, and with our parents to a certain degree, that, well, these people are out for our best interest. The medical field is out for our best interest. The dental field, the government, the whatever. They're out for our best interest. They're really looking out for us. And then us coming up behind them, my parents were baby boomers, and I started questioning like you at probably right around the same age. And you realize over time very quickly that, wow, I don't really understand this. And you kind of have this inkling, but I don't think they're for my best interest. And then that moves you to go to the next step, which is like, okay, well, if they're not in my best interest, then whose best interests are they? Is it themselves? Is it somebody else? Like you were just saying,
We've all been deceived and manipulated in somehow, and I
right?
think there's been so many chemical exposures that people don't even realize how that has impacted them and even manipulated their own
Yeah.
physiology. Um, so you really, like, I think detoxing is important, and I think that word scares a lot of people, but
Mm-hmm.
Our body detoxes every day. That's what it wants to do, particularly
Yep.
if there's more exposure in the environment. You don't want that accumulation because it's trying to clear what doesn't belong.
Yeah, whatever is like foreign. And how would you, so now that you're talking about detoxing, what do you think, just for the average person out there that's like, yeah, I think I need a little bit more mild detoxing in my life. So if you were just going to try to keep up, and what would be your ideal method for sort of like a everyday detox where you're not, sitting on a toilet all day long? A
It
sort of
doesn't
more
have to be like
natural, graceful little, I'm getting exposed as, I mean, right now, even sitting here, we're on Zoom right now together. I mean, I'm being hit with stuff. You're being hit with stuff. Uh,
yeah.
we might have been outside today, whatever. So what do you think? What would you recommend as just an average sort of daily detox?
Yeah. So just to preface, detox does not have to be a cathartic laxative or that is not what I meant by it. It doesn't have to be that harsh at all. It really doesn't. It's just supporting the body's detox pathways for one. So it's
Okay.
making sure that the nutrients and where we're getting our nutrients from are cleaner sources.
Right.
And this is where, so water, I'll start with that. I would
Okay.
recommend a good water distiller, which I can pass on information after.
Yeah, absolutely.
So just because one, most water filters are not that great. If you're getting municipal water, even if you're getting well water, you just don't
Right.
know the runoff is going into it. If
Exactly.
you are getting municipal water, there's so many pharmaceuticals that are dipping into the water supply.
Mhm.
Is that really getting purified?
No.
It's something to look into.
And I know a
It,
lot of like city water and municipal water and things like that are heavily chlorinated. I mean, so heavy that you can taste it in different areas, as you travel around. And I know I'm sensitive to it. So as I travel around, I know what the minute I'm like, ugh, I actually bring a water pitcher, and it's like just a Brita, but it's easy to travel with. But I am one of those people that brings my little Brita when I travel.
yeah, and then the fluoride that's in the water.
Right.
And with more people on drugs and pharmaceuticals,
Yeah.
that's totally seeping in.
It's
So
seeping
I
into
would get
the
a,
lakes and the rivers and everywhere else, because it's kind of like, if something's getting in the water, it's like everything eventually all makes its way around our earth.
hmm and so I recommend a good quality
Hmm.
water distiller, one
Okay.
that's heavy duty, that's going to last long. It's made of stainless steel, so you're not getting that exposure to more plastic either. Um, and the reason I say that is because it basically to remove even radioactive elements and things like that.
Oh,
Because a lot of people do get the reverse osmosis, but I like the water distiller because
okay.
it's just water, nothing else. That's all that's in it. And
Okay.
then people do ask about minerals, but the inorganic minerals that's in water you don't really absorb. You do get most of your minerals from other sources like food and whatnot.
Okay.
Um, so I wouldn't rely on water as a mineral source only. And plus, you can always supplement because most of our food that we're consuming is it's not the same food that it was 100
Yeah,
years
very
ago.
depleted.
Our soils are being depleted.
Hmm. Which means that us from getting essential minerals, which is where we get them from, is being depleted.
Yes, yeah. So I think personally, I do think it's important to supplement. Um,
Okay. Yeah, yeah. And I would also add to that list, and people that watch the show know I represent the LifeWave patches. There is a glutathione patch that we have, and there's no drugs or chemicals. That's just uh, a stimulation, like a wavelength, almost like a frequency. So it's light frequency, and that's all it is. And that's a gentle daily detox, or even sometimes we often tell people do it 3 times a week or something like that, as long as you're doing something.
Glutathione is one of our master antioxidants.
Yes.
So awesome for supporting glutathione.
Yeah.
And
And I think
most,
people can get it in drips too. I find the patches are just easy and effective.
yeah, and most folks like most gals
Hmm.
are end up being deficient in glutathione. It just seems to be something that's
Yeah,
common that I find in a lot of folks that I work with.
interesting.
Um,
That and copper, I find that a lot of people are deficient in copper as well.
Interesting. Yeah, I always
Oh,
check. So when I do micronutrient testing, and I look for so the minerals, but I look at intracellular minerals, and
mhm.
I always do check their copper and zinc to see, because some people get copper, like copper pipes. So sometimes their copper levels are not as deficient if they're still getting, if they have copper pipes or some other.
Yeah. And that's another thing they've replaced. They've replaced all that with the PECs and that kind of stuff. And I think from what I've read about copper is if you're deficient in copper, it steals your iron. So then some people show up as anemic, but it's actually an
Hmm.
iron deficiency. So you won't show up as copper deficient. You'll show up as iron deficient.
Hmm. Yeah, so that's why I like to check the when I do the
Yeah.
micronutrient testing, I check for their basically their zinc and their copper ratio, just
Okay.
to see making sure that the balance is there. Um, but that's water. Food, I would get organic as I can, and I would go local to the local farms. Um, get to know your farmers.
And the meats too, especially.
Meat is huge, absolutely. Um, I'm a proponent in supporting the consumption of meat because I feel that there's it's very nutrient dense.
Right.
Um, it's so, and it's just making wiser decisions as far as where we're sourcing our meat from.
Yeah.
Because what you're going to buy in a store is, I mean, the country of origin isn't even listed if it is.
Yeah,
The
or it's
majority are not. Yeah.
multiple. Like it could be coming from all different kinds of farms and stuff like that, just sort of, but mixed in together.
Yes, yes. So I would seek out an organic farm. If you can't find an organic farm near you, speak to the farmers. Just
Yeah.
get to know your farmer and ask, you know, as far as how are they treating the animals? What are they feeding them?
Mhm.
Um, what are they injecting? Just get to know
Yeah.
your food supply, because we've been distanced from our food source. We don't know
Yeah.
where our
And
food's
we've
coming
become
from.
dependent, very, very dependent on our food sources as well.
Yes, absolutely. So that's
And what
water.
about dairy? Dairy's a big one too. I know, like, I personally am a raw milk proponent.
Mhm.
I know that's very controversial for a lot of people. But yeah, during my research has shown that raw milk and whole milk,
Mhm.
organic whole milk addition.
Yeah, getting those whole fats. I
Mhm.
agree. I like raw milk. Depends where you are or where you're located. It's for some people
Yeah,
it's a little harder to find.
right.
But there are definitely some online resources that you can always seek out. And again, get your raw milk from an organic source as much as you can.
Yes.
Because those, especially the fat soluble toxins, will end up in the milk,
Hmm.
and then you're consuming that. And I'm a big fan of whole milk as well. But again, just getting it from a clean source. But I think it's important to get those whole fats. So there's so many trends in diets. I'm not a
Yeah.
dogmatic as far as saying like this diet is the best and
Mhm.
it for everyone and it's going to work. And I don't agree with that. But do you remember the whole fat free fad from,
Yes, that was big in the 90s when, yeah.
yeah. And
Yeah.
then add the
Yeah.
GMOs and then we're deficient in our fat soluble nutrients. We get deficient in vitamin
Yeah.
D
And,
and yeah.
and if you think about it, now that we're talking about it, back in the 90s, I remember that was like when, everything's fat free and all this other stuff. And that was when I would say, even the 90s, and growing up as a kid in the early 70s into, when I graduated, it wasn't, you didn't see a lot of very obese, overweight people. Like it was definitely not as common as it is today. And it's kind of strange now that we're talking about it that in the 90s, all this fat free and whatnot stuff came about. But the obesity problem since that has actually grown. So that could be another rabbit hole for you people out there. Because it is
There's
a
a lot.
weird connection. I mean, because I remember even in the 90s, when I graduated high school back in 1990, yeah, there weren't that many people that were overweight. Very, very few, even off the top of my head. I can't even really. think of more than a handful, if that. And
Hmm.
during that time was when I think all that fat-free stuff. And then you have to look, well, if it's fat-free or low fat or whatever, what are they supplementing with that? And I think that's what comes out with, those are a lot of endocrine disruptors on top of it, you know, the aspartame and all these other things, sucralose and whatnot.
Yeah, yeah. Listen, there's lots of obesogens in these processed foods,
Mhm.
so it's absolutely, and they are endocrine
Interesting.
disruptors. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So while you may be trying to get thin, you may be almost counteracting your whole efforts with what you're purchasing. So please look at the labels on this stuff.
Absolutely. Yeah. So that's uh,
Oh,
just getting whole food. I think that's huge for most of society, particularly
yeah.
if you're on the go. If you don't have time to prepare food, then at least get something that might, even if it's prepackaged, it's
Yeah, a
organic, and
prepackaged
at least.
salad can be amazing depending on where you get it from.
Hmm. Yeah.
It's
But
funny, as you're talking, I'm realizing that very much your interest in nutrition has played a big part in your naturopathic career.
you know what? It did. You're right. You've actually made that connection, and you're absolutely right. My interest in connection, interest in connecting to nutrition, that absolutely has played out into my practice,
Mhm.
and even in my own personal decisions in real life too.
Right.
Um,
Yeah, because we
so
should be practicing what we're preaching. I
you know what?
hate to admit it, like when I was young, I had this female OB-ish doctor. I don't know what she was, but she was so massive. I was, and I'll be totally honest, I was like, how can I listen to anything when you say when you are grossly overweight? And I get it, that's your choice, but don't be trying to tell me what to do. It was very weird. I digress.
So I didn't realize this then when I was on my health journey, when I started it, but I was practicing naturopathic medicine on myself. I just didn't realize it
Yeah.
at the time. But now, hindsight's 2020. You reflect
Right.
back, right? And so I was. Just one of the principles of naturopathic medicine is doctor heal thyself.
Mm.
So that's what
Very,
I was.
very much so. I
Mhm.
wholeheartedly believe that. Like, no matter what you're following, I think that should be true.
It is, and it's being authentic, right?
Mhm.
And who are you to help somebody if with these same concerns, if you weren't able to figure it out yourself?
Mhm. And I think it's okay to not know and to research and to be like, you know what? I don't know, but we need to dig a little further. Whereas I think there's just this quick instant fix, instant gratification that is built into not only life in general, but specifically our medical systems that have almost programmed people that I get a pill, I get better, and it's very, very quickly. Whereas a lot of things like supplementation, like the patches, like anything else that we're talking about here, you've got to give this 3 months, 6 months, sometimes longer, because all of that stuff that you've been doing to your body, and correct me if I'm wrong, but all of these things that have been building up, they've been building up for a really long time until we even show the first physical noticeable symptom. So that first symptom that's noticeable to us, it did just come out of nowhere. It's something that's been building in the background, like these toxins that maybe we were exposed to as kids. They're now kind of surfacing finally. I don't want to say finally, but we didn't know about them.
Hmm. Absolutely. Um, this has been a long road, right?
Right.
And absolutely, we have to work on ourselves. And not to say that I have all the answers. No, I'm always improving. I'm always
Right.
working on myself, and I'm always trying to get better.
Yeah.
And like we all have our little bit of struggles, but we just we address them and we work on them, and we address, and by doing that, there's a growth process that comes out of it.
Mm.
So absolutely, like I
Yeah.
had expressed earlier, I was like, okay, I think I've got to support my detox pathways because
Yeah.
I'm traveling, and I've got to add this in or that in, or I've noticed I haven't eaten as much. For example, I haven't eaten as much vegetables, and let me add a little bit more vegetables into my diet. And this is kind of as you know yourself and as you work on yourself, and you connect more with that intuition and then inner knowing, you start basically, you become your own guide. It's like, okay, let me
Yeah.
add this
Like your
in.
intuition increases, knowing your body.
You listen to
Increases.
your body and you
Yeah.
listen to your
Knowing
inner
what's off
voice.
for you. Right. That's so important.
Yeah.
So much of us are detached from our own intuition, our own gut feeling. So sometimes we've been so programmed that it's like, oh my gosh, is this my gut feeling or is this a program? I don't know. Is this something I've been told or is this a true gut feeling? And it takes a while for us to get back there.
It's discernment, and we're
Yeah.
always practicing discernment.
Yes. Or we should be.
Yeah, we should be, exactly. And it's a skill for sure,
Mhm.
it's a learned skill.
Yeah. And I love what you said. You said that you're constantly improving yourself. And I know just from my perspective, anybody that I go out to seek help with, whether it's a coach, a naturopath, I want someone who's still in the game of learning, not, well, I'm done. I know it all now. Just come to me because I have all the answers, because the journey never stops. And those are the people that I want to work with. I want to work with people that are constantly expanding their knowledge, learning new things, maybe questioning things that they were taught that maybe they heard something was like, oh, I never looked at it that way. Like you just said, like discernment. I mean, to me, these are the best people to grow and learn and seek treatment from.
Oh yeah, even I've gone back and I've questioned some of the stuff that I was taught in the basic sciences.
Mhm.
And especially within the last 4 or 5 years. Like, oh, is this
Yeah.
the way it works? It's like, I don't know. I was taught this, but but this
Yeah.
is, but it's showing up differently here, or
Yeah.
um, yeah,
And I think
we're all in the
sometimes
process.
you have to recognize when some things are presented there, is this presented in this format to support a narrative, or is this presented in this format for my own true good? And only I think we can discern that.
Hmm. Absolutely. And that is part of the process of connecting to our intuition. And even with detoxifying, we even have to
Mhm.
detoxify from social media. Not being a consumer of it, so to say. The whole EMFs and these artificial lights and all of this. Like, what is this doing to our physiology?
Yeah.
Um, it's and what social media is doing to the psyche of people and um, the social engineering of people and
Yeah.
how people behave. And so there's so much manipulation, and I think sometimes
Right.
it's good. It's almost it's kind of nice to retreat away from that. And when you basically, it is a detox. You are detoxifying, like just reducing your exposure to it. Then you start to listen to your inner voice because all of that noise becomes less so.
That makes so much sense. And so often we don't go inward enough. And I do feel
Yes.
that the more inward we go and look and heal, and as you just said, as we get away from the distraction, we can discern our own truth. I mean, especially in times like this, like, as we're sitting here talking, it's actually election day. So there's so much out there. And how do you detox with that? It's hard not to hear it because it is so everywhere. But even with things like that, you have to listen to your own heart and what your own heart is telling you, and your own discernment. But as we were saying, when we go inside, once we heal what's inside our internal world, then we can help others and heal the external world and create the external world that we desire, not somebody else's version of it that they've programmed into us, that mostly benefits them and not us.
Yeah, the system was or the systems, right, were
Mm-hmm.
designed to protect a certain group of folks, and obviously not the majority, so to say. But once you get to that level of awareness and you've done some research, right? And
Mm-hmm.
gone down some rabbit holes and move away from the mainstream avenues. I mean, even medicine, the symbol of medicine, it's
Mm.
a snake. Once you go down and you start digging into that, it's like, what is that all about?
Mhm.
And this has been part of, in finishing up 2019 and going into 2020, I said to myself, I want to go, one of the things I want to work on personally was my spiritual wheelhouse.
Mm.
It was my spiritual growth and development. That's one of the things I wanted to connect more with. And that was my touching base with and just learning more about or just connecting more with my intuition and just listening to that
Mhm.
and and just tying more to it and um, learning to like how do I read my intuition, how does my body recognize things and just certain signs.
Yeah.
um, and that's been part of my journey for these last almost 5 years.
Mm.
And so in that, as I was reflecting on and like, all right, like what actually is the symbol of medicine and this whole Rockefeller medicine thing, and and what is it? You got the symbol of the snake, or the snakes on the astropole, and the significance of that. So, and then you do end up questioning, all right, what is conventional allopathic medicine?
Yeah.
It wasn't, what was it intended for? Was it really intended to help people? I mean, there's the heroic aspect of it, which I was taught in
Mhm.
philosophy in my first year of naturopathic school, where there are some aggressive treatments for sure, and they are invasive. And there are times, like if we got into a car accident, there are times we're going to need some of those heroic,
Absolutely.
invasive treatments.
Yeah, and quick, like quick acting. If you're bleeding, that needs to stop.
But there's, as far as even the word prevention, you have to quite
Mhm.
question that. Like, are we over medicalizing things?
Oh, interesting.
But, again, it was just connecting the whole symbol of the snake and, medicine and pharmaceuticals and pharmakia and, and the word
Mhm.
poison and all of these things. And
Yeah,
so,
almost getting down to the etymology of things. And the etymology is basically the meaning of how words are put together and the true origin and meaning of those words versus, maybe what Webster's or Wikipedia says.
yeah. So that has made me um, connect more, kind of just uh, set a little bit more boundaries. And
Yeah.
I've moved away from mainstream media, or as I said, I don't want to be the consumer of mainstream media,
Hmm.
and gone on to some of these alternative social media.
Right.
And even then, you still kind of want to set boundaries with that because some of that can also be a little bit toxic in a way,
Yeah. And it all means
and negative.
discernment.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because
And
everybody's putting their own spin on things. I mean, I guess you could look at it like even we are. We're putting our own spin based on our own knowledge and research and life experiences.
yeah, yeah. So this whole process has actually brought me closer to my faith. And I think faith is a very personal journey too.
Well,
It's very personal.
very much so. And I think with what you're saying, you're talking about not just hormonal balance, but, when I look at naturopathic, I do look at it from this holistic perspective. And you probably heard of it, that whole like wheel of life thing. It's like, well, what's out of balance in my wheel of life? You have your health, you have your finances, you have your relationships, your work life thing and these other components. So it's really your spirituality. So it's about balancing all of those. And I would imagine it sounds like you've identified that spirituality was one of those for you that was out of balance that you need to pay attention to.
Correct. Yeah. And not knowing that what 2020 was going to be, and what I was going to be thrusted into.
Right.
Um, but I just knew that I wanted to connect more to my intuition. And then lo and behold, the whole madness of everything. And then I just said, all right, I need a break from all this, and kind of set those boundaries. And I've learned a lot in the process, and you become more of who you are meant to be, and that and less from other influences. So you do become more of your true nature.
Yeah, that makes so much sense.
And and we've all been deceived and manipulated in some way or somehow. And
Mhm.
it's, it really is a process to overcome that manipulation and that deception. So again, like even in my journey towards naturopathic medicine and even acupuncture, I've even I've questioned some of the things, like I said, the symbolism and whatnot.
Right. Right. So speaking of that, how do people work with you? Like, what does it look like to work with you as a naturopath?
Yeah. So one of my favorite kinds of care is one-on-one care. There's so many options out there to do group care. Um, and I find that I like helping folks one-on-one. There's more of that high touch support.
Mm,
And then everybody is so unique and different. And even if they're not sure if they have PC, like their hormones are imbalanced, right? They're
mhm.
dealing with some hormonal imbalance, and they may not know if they have polycystic ovarian syndrome, or they're wondering if they do. It's not about the label. It's
Yeah.
because it's a cluster. Essentially, it's a syndrome, so it's a cluster of symptoms.
And what
Um,
it looked like for you may not have been what it looked like for me as well. So it looks
exact.
differently in everybody.
It is, so it's not everyone has the same cluster of symptoms,
Right.
and then not everyone has the same intensity of those symptoms. So, and this is where I think working one on one with folks,
Mm,
just individualizing and personalizing, is where we get the furthest, and I get a better sense of, as far as the kind of care and where to guide them and coach them and support their journey in finding balance, not only with their hormones, but with other aspects of their life and whatever their health goals are.
mm.
So I start with a discovery call, and they're free. It's usually about a half hour,
Okay.
25 minutes call, typically about that time. I just want to make sure that we're fit to work together. And then from there, you can actually book that directly on the website, or you
Okay.
can reach out to me directly if you have any trouble. I can give you the link, and
Yep.
then
And
there's
I
a
will provide everything that you're talking about in the description on whatever platform that you're watching this.
yeah, yeah. It's just a screen out and just kind of get a
Yeah.
sense of what your health
Easy.
concerns are, and that I'm a good fit to support you in your health journey. And there's no hard feelings if you're not, if we're not a good fit to work together. But if I said, you know what, I suggest you go doing this first, or I may refer you somewhere else, or wherever, or go get this done first, then come back to see me,
Mhm.
whatever it may be. I try to make the recommendations that I think are going to be best for the person on the other end of the call. And these calls can be done by the phone or over video. So I let folks choose whatever their comfort levels are. Um, and then from there, I like to do an initial assessment, which I like to do comprehensive blood work. I interpret that blood work, and we do the initial consultation. So I bundle that into the assessment, where I review their health history together, kind of get a sense of what they've dealt with. All right, this makes sense. This is playing into what you're experiencing, just to kind of tease things out, and if anything, put a little bit of a timeline to the story. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Um, and that's the initial assessment, and then from there I get a better sense of the functional care that's going to work best for them.
Yeah.
But
So
I
get
check
more
everybody's.
deeper into because like you said, everybody's individual. So there's no like one size fits all when it comes to this.
No, I mean, there's generalities, for
Right.
sure. Like there's some generalities that can apply to most people, but I think the nuances
Mm,
are important as far as with the one-on-one care, and just to kind of
yeah.
get a little more personalized, because people are so flustered. There's so much information out there. There's no
Right.
shortage of information that people have access to,
Yep.
and just
And whether
teasing
you're
that
like
out.
pro something or against, you could probably find an argument for both.
Yeah,
Whatever even
yeah.
herb you're looking at, you can probably find all the pros for it and the cons. So yeah, there's no shortage of that.
Yep. And, and even that's a lot of noise to tease out and figure out
Right.
okay, should I do this? Should I do that? Do you think this would be a good idea? So I like to do functional lab testing. And the reason is the whole saying of test, don't guess. And just that way, the recommendations are more targeted
Hmm.
um, to suit the person. And we have a better idea of, okay, uh, this lab test is just going to provide us more information. And then we have a better idea of like, all right, I'm going to have you do this or that.
Yeah.
And we
But
can
as
make
you had
some
said,
assumptions. But
it's about getting to that root cause.
absolutely. And you know what? And it's not always one thing. That's the other thing people don't realize is it's accumulation of
Yeah.
multiple factors. Hormonal imbalance tends to be a multi-system imbalance. So not only is it the endocrine system, it's the GI tract. So gut health is something that I focus on because that is everything that we're consuming and
Mm.
our gut lining. And then on the other side of our gut lining is the blood. And then once things are in circulation into the blood, then what's happening? What is it doing to our other systems? So it's not just a hormonal imbalance, although that is maybe what people focus on, but there's underlying things that basically surface up or bring symptoms that are hormonal imbalance. I hope that makes sense.
No, that makes total sense. And I think that's what most people want. I think most people they don't want the Band-Aid. They want whatever it is. They want the root cause. And that's what they're after. Like how, like nobody wants just reoccurring stuff and the chronic sort of society that we've created. So I think most people are really after the root cause. So
Yeah,
how do
yeah.
people get in touch with you so that they can, book an appointment with you, get a consultation, see if you are a good fit? So where's all the good details on how to get a hold of you?
Yeah, yeah. So I love helping people take responsibility for their health. That's,
Mm,
a
very
big
much.
aspect. And yeah, and this is the process of taking ownership for our health.
Love that.
So it's reclaiming our health essentially. And so you can go directly to the website, which is hollygrovehealth.com. If you scroll down, there is a button that you can click. It's book now. And that will take you directly to the link to book the discovery call. But if you're having any trouble accessing, again, just reach out to me. My email is Cindy, it's CINDY at hollygrovehealth.com. That's another way. But that'll at least start the process. Just make sure that we're a fit to work together. And then if we
Yeah.
are, I can definitely provide more information.
Absolutely. So check out Dr. Cindy's website, book your appointment through there, see how she is helping, especially women with the hormone imbalance, which leads to all kinds of other things. So fix it now. uh,
Yeah, yeah,
and
absolutely.
take responsibility for your own health and not just one opinion in a system that may or not be after your best interest.
Yes, and you know what? You grow in the process, and I like to educate people too. So when I review their lab results with them, um, I I interpret the lab results and I give them digital copies of everything with my notes on it.
Nice.
So I am explaining things so they have a better understanding of how their body works.
Oh, that's
Um,
amazing.
and I find that educational aspect is being missed even in the typical setting of medical care.
Yeah, because you're putting the power back in their hands because nobody likes to be talked over. You know what I mean? Like, or
Yeah.
condescended to. And I feel like that's sort of prevalent in our system. So this is fantastic. What I would love to know, what would you leave people with regarding their health, naturopathic medicine, and kind of your beliefs?
Yeah. You know what? It's a journey. And just recognizing that where you are in the process and don't self-sabotage. That's one thing that I think is important.
Mm,
Just know that your efforts are they're not useless. I've seen people go, they've tried so many different things and they're not sure what's going on. But it is good to have someone on your side that's a support system that is not only giving you some answers, or at least supporting you in searching out for what's going to be beneficial for you. Just know that it's a process and it's not an overnight fix. But it is nice to have at least a doctor that is going to be on your side and it's looking out for your best interests,
And
and not
after
the
the root
interests
cause.
of, yeah, it's like you're a person. You're not a CPT code. You're not an ICD-10 code, or they used to be ICD-9 codes, but you're not a diagnosis code. It's it's like, don't go somewhere just because your insurance covers it. It's explore outside of that system
Yeah.
and see what's available out there. And that's where I think people really get the help that they need.
Well, I love that. Oh my gosh. Thank you so much. We kind of went a little all over the place today, but
Yeah, sorry about that.
oh no, I'm all on board. It just goes where it goes. But oh my gosh, thank you so much. And I would love to have you back. I'm sure we can go down many other avenues and topics, but I think this gives people a really good place to start.
Absolutely. We all have to start somewhere, and don't feel defeated. I think that's important.
Yeah.
Because it is mind, body, spirit, and you have to be at a good place. And even
Very
if you
much.
have to make changes, just little changes,
Mm.
little wins. It takes, it takes time. You have to give yourself a little bit of grace, because health is a journey for sure.
Well said. Well, thank you so much for being on. I look forward to having you back. As I said, all of Dr. Cindy's information will be in the description on whatever platform you are watching. I thank you again, Dr. Cindy, for being on and being my guest today. And for everybody else, thank you again for watching another episode of The Wealth Within Us.
Thank you very much, Michelle.
Absolutely. Right now, you can begin aging gracefully, full of energy, vitality, and overall wellness. But as time goes by, our bodies can start to show signs of aging. Until now, introducing LifeWave X39, the world's first product that activates our own cells. This breakthrough in regenerative science helps restore our bodies to a healthier, more youthful state. X39 uses patented phototherapy to elevate a copper peptide that signals cellular activation. Think of it as your internal repair system, generating younger, healthier cells that can rejuvenate your tissues and organs. Just one X39 patch applied daily is all it takes. Safe, non-invasive, and backed by clinical studies, this is your chance to regain control over your vitality. Don't miss out on the future of anti-aging. Experience the power of X39 today. Visit patchedlight.com and start living younger now.